Tom Henderson woke up that Tuesday morning feeling good about life. The sun was shining through his bedroom window, and he could smell coffee brewing downstairs. His wife Sarah was already up making breakfast like she did every morning for the past 20 years. Tom stretched his arms and smiled. He had no idea that this ordinary Tuesday would mark the beginning of the most frustrating period of his entire life. After eating his usual breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, Tom grabbed his coffee mug and walked outside to get the morning newspaper. He always enjoyed this quiet moment before heading to work at the insurance office. The air was crisp and cold, but not unpleasant. Tom loved living on Maple Street with its neat houses and friendly neighbors. Everything was peaceful and predictable, just the way he liked it. But when Tom reached the end of his driveway, his peaceful morning shattered like glass. His beautiful white mailbox lay in pieces on the frozen ground. The wooden post that he had painted just last spring was snapped completely in half. The metal mailbox itself was dented and twisted beyond repair. His mail was scattered everywhere across the yard, like someone had thrown confetti at a party. Tom stood there holding his coffee mug, staring at the destruction. He could not believe what he was seeing. Bills and letters were stuck to the frost-covered grass. His neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, was getting her own mail, and she noticed Tom standing there looking confused and upset. She walked over, shaking her head with sympathy. Mrs. Garcia was a kind elderly woman who had lived on the street even longer than Tom. She had seen many things happen over the years, but this level of destruction was unusual for their quiet neighborhood. "Tom, this is terrible," she said, looking at the mess. "Who would do such a thing to your lovely mailbox? You always keep your property so nice and clean. This must have been some kind of accident. Maybe a drunk driver lost control of their car." Tom nodded slowly, still trying to process what had happened. "That must be it," he said to himself. "Someone probably slid on the ice and crashed into his mailbox. These things happen especially during winter when the roads get slippery." He felt better thinking it was just an accident rather than someone deliberately destroying his property. He spent the rest of the morning picking up his mail and cleaning up the debris. Some of the letters were damaged, but most could still be read. Tom threw the broken pieces of his mailbox into the garbage and made a mental note to buy materials for a new one over the weekend. At work that day, Tom told his coworkers about the mailbox incident. Everyone agreed it was probably just an accident. His friend Mike from accounting said the same thing had happened to his cousin last winter when a teenager slid off the road during a snowstorm. "These things happen," Mike said. "At least nobody got hurt." Tom felt relieved that he was not the only person to experience this kind of property damage. Accidents happen, and insurance would probably cover the cost of replacement anyway. He decided not to worry about it too much. That weekend, Tom drove to the hardware store and bought everything he needed to build a new mailbox. He actually felt excited about the project. It had been a while since he had done any kind of construction work, and he missed working with his hands. He chose the best materials available, including treated wood for the post and a sturdy metal mailbox that would last for years. Tom spent most of Saturday building his new mailbox. He dug a deep hole and set the post in concrete to make sure it would be extra strong. He painted everything with 2 coats of bright white paint that would look perfect against his green lawn. Mrs. Garcia watched from her window and waved approvingly when he finished. By Sunday evening, Tom had a beautiful new mailbox that looked even better than the original. He felt proud of his work and confident that he would not have any more problems. Little did Tom know that his troubles were just beginning, and that someone was already planning the next attack on his peaceful suburban life. 2 weeks passed peacefully after Tom rebuilt his mailbox. He had almost forgotten about the incident and was back to his normal routine of morning coffee and newspaper reading. The new mailbox looked perfect sitting at the end of his driveway. Tom felt proud every time he saw it standing there strong and white against the winter landscape. But on a cold Thursday morning, Tom's peaceful world came crashing down again. He walked outside expecting another normal day, but instead found his beautiful new mailbox destroyed once more. This time, the damage looked completely different from the first attack. The metal was covered in deep dents that formed a clear pattern. Someone had repeatedly hit his mailbox with what looked like a baseball bat. Tom knelt down to examine the damage more closely. The wooden post was not broken by accident this time. Someone had deliberately kicked it over and over until it snapped. The concrete base that Tom had been so proud of was cracked and chipped. This was not the work of a careless driver sliding on ice. This was pure vandalism. His cheerful morning mood disappeared instantly. Tom felt his face getting hot with anger and confusion. Who would do this to him? And why? He was a quiet man who minded his own business and never bothered anyone. He paid his taxes on time, kept his yard neat, and always waved to his neighbors. Tom could not think of any reason why someone would target him specifically. Sarah came outside when she heard Tom making frustrated noises. She took one look at the destroyed mailbox and immediately understood what had happened. "Oh, Tom," she said, putting her hand on his shoulder. "Someone did this on purpose, didn't they?" Tom nodded his head, unable to speak. He was too angry and confused to form words. Sarah suggested they should call the police right away to report the vandalism. But Tom felt embarrassed about calling the authorities over a mailbox. What would the police think about a grown man who could not protect his own property from teenage pranks? Instead, Tom decided to pay closer attention to what was happening on his street. That evening, he sat by his bedroom window and watched the neighborhood. He wanted to see if anything unusual was going on during the night hours. Maybe he could spot the person responsible and handle the situation himself. Tom started noticing patterns that he had never paid attention to before. Most of his neighbors turned off their lights by 10 o'clock. The street became very quiet after 11. Only occasional cars drove past during the late night hours. Tom realized that someone could easily walk down the street and vandalize property without being seen by anyone. He spent the weekend rebuilding his mailbox again, but this time he made it even stronger. Tom used thicker wood for the post and reinforced it with metal brackets. He poured twice as much concrete around the base and added a steel plate to protect the bottom. The new mailbox looked like a fortress compared to his previous attempts. Tom also installed a small light above the mailbox that would turn on automatically when it got dark. He hoped the extra lighting would discourage whoever was causing the damage. Maybe they would move on to easier targets that were not so well protected. Mrs. Garcia watched Tom working and came over to offer encouragement. "You are doing the right thing," she said. "Whoever is doing this will get tired of bothering you when they see how determined you are. Sometimes you have to show bullies that you are not going to give up easily." Tom felt better after talking to his neighbor. He was not going to let some random vandal drive him crazy. His new super-strong mailbox would surely survive whatever the troublemaker tried to do next. But deep in his heart, Tom had a growing feeling that this problem was far from over. The third attack on Tom's mailbox happened exactly 10 days later. This time the vandal had gone too far. Not only was his reinforced mailbox completely destroyed, but someone had spray-painted the word "loser" in bright red letters across his driveway. The paint was still wet when Tom discovered it that morning, which meant the attack had happened very recently. Tom stood in his driveway, staring at the mess with his hands shaking from anger. His face turned red, and he could feel his heart beating fast in his chest. This was no longer just about property damage. Someone was trying to humiliate him in front of his entire neighborhood. The word "loser" seemed to glow like fire against the gray concrete of his driveway. Mrs. Garcia came outside to get her newspaper and gasped when she saw what had happened. "Tom, this is getting completely out of control," she said. "You absolutely must call the police now. This person is escalating their attacks, and who knows what they might do next." But Tom was too embarrassed to call the authorities. What would his neighbors think if police cars showed up at his house over mailbox vandalism? People might assume he had done something wrong to deserve this treatment. Tom had always been a private person who preferred to handle his own problems without involving outsiders. Instead, Tom made a decision that would change everything. He was going to catch this vandal himself. That evening, he prepared for his first official surveillance mission. Tom gathered his old binoculars from the closet and filled a large thermos with hot coffee. He positioned a comfortable chair by his bedroom window where he had a perfect view of the street and his mailbox. Sarah thought her husband was losing his mind. "Tom, you cannot stay awake all night watching for some random teenager," she argued. "You have to work tomorrow, and you need your sleep. Let the police handle this situation like normal people do." But Tom was determined to solve this mystery himself. He felt like his reputation and dignity were at stake. If he could not protect his own property, then what kind of man was he? Tom had never been in a real fight or confrontation in his entire life, but this situation was pushing him to his limits. The first night of surveillance was harder than Tom expected. Staying awake and alert for hours while staring at an empty street was boring and exhausting. His eyes kept getting heavy and his neck became sore from holding the binoculars. Every small sound or movement made his heart race with excitement, but it was always just a cat or the wind blowing trash around. Tom drank coffee all night and fought to keep his eyes open. By morning, he was exhausted and grumpy, but he had not seen anything suspicious. The vandal had not shown up, which meant they might have changed their schedule or taken a break from their destructive activities. The second night was just as uneventful. Tom began to wonder if the person responsible had moved on to bothering someone else. Maybe his surveillance plan was working as a deterrent even though he had not actually caught anyone yet. On the third night, Tom was starting to lose hope. His eyes were burning from lack of sleep, and Sarah was worried about his health. But Tom refused to give up. He knew that persistence was the key to solving any problem. Then on the fourth night of watching, something amazing happened. At exactly 11:30, Tom saw a figure walking down the street carrying what looked like a baseball bat. His heart started pounding with excitement and fear. After weeks of frustration and humiliation, Tom was finally going to see his tormentor face to face. Tom pressed his binoculars against his eyes and focused on the figure walking down the street. What he saw shocked him completely. The vandal was not some tough teenage boy like he had imagined. Instead, it was a girl who looked about 16 years old with bright purple hair that stood out even in the darkness. She was small and thin but carried herself with confidence. The baseball bat rested on her shoulder like she was a professional player heading to practice. Tom watched in amazement as she walked directly toward his house without any hesitation. This girl knew exactly where she was going and what she planned to do. Tom had expected to feel angry when he finally saw his tormentor, but instead he felt confused and curious. Why would this random teenage girl target his mailbox specifically? He had never seen her before in his life. She did not live on his street because Tom knew all of his neighbors. This meant she was traveling from somewhere else just to vandalize his property. The girl stopped in front of Tom's rebuilt mailbox and examined it carefully. She walked around it like an artist studying a sculpture. Tom could see her nodding as if she approved of the challenge his reinforced design would provide. Then she lifted her bat and began her systematic destruction. She worked with practiced efficiency that showed this was not her first time destroying mailboxes. The girl hit the metal in specific spots that would cause maximum damage. She knew exactly how much force to use and where to aim her strikes. When the mailbox was properly dented, she kicked the wooden post repeatedly until it started to lean at a dangerous angle. Tom watched the entire performance from his window, feeling amazed and horrified at the same time. This girl was treating mailbox destruction like a professional skill. She had clearly done this many times before and had developed her own techniques for maximum effectiveness. When she finished destroying his mailbox, the girl stepped back to admire her work. Tom could see her smiling with satisfaction, like an artist completing a masterpiece. She adjusted the bat on her shoulder and began walking away into the darkness as casually as she had arrived. Tom's mind raced with questions as he watched her disappear. Who was this purple-haired girl and why was she targeting him? What had he done to deserve this treatment? Where did she live, and how had she even found his house? Tom realized he knew nothing about his enemy except that she was young, female, and very good at destroying property. He grabbed a notebook from his bedside table and wrote down everything he could remember about the girl. Purple hair, approximately 16 years old, about 5 feet tall, wearing dark clothing, and carrying a wooden baseball bat. She had arrived at 11:30 and spent about 10 minutes destroying his mailbox before leaving in the same direction she had come from. Tom felt excited about finally seeing his vandal, but also frustrated that he still did not have any real answers. The girl remained a complete mystery to him. He did not even know if purple was her natural hair color, or if she dyed it to stand out. Maybe the bright color was part of her rebellious personality. Sarah woke up when Tom came back to bed and asked if anything had happened during his surveillance. Tom told her about the purple-haired girl, and Sarah was as shocked as he had been. "A teenage girl," she repeated. "That makes no sense at all. Why would some random girl keep destroying your mailbox?" Tom had no answer for his wife's question. He had been expecting to discover that neighborhood boys were playing pranks, or that someone had a grudge against him for some forgotten reason. But this mysterious girl changed everything. Her attacks seemed completely random and motiveless, which made them even more disturbing. The next morning, Tom found his mailbox destroyed exactly as he had witnessed. Seeing the damage in daylight after watching it happen made the whole experience feel surreal. Tom knew he had to do something more than just rebuild and watch. This purple-haired girl was not going to stop on her own. Tom decided he needed to confront the purple-haired girl directly. Watching from his window was not enough anymore. He wanted answers about why she was targeting him, and he hoped to convince her to stop destroying his property. Tom believed that if he could just talk to her reasonably, then maybe they could work out their differences like civilized people. The next evening, Tom prepared for his confrontation mission. He parked his car at the end of the street where he could see his mailbox, but remain hidden from view. Tom brought a flashlight and his cell phone in case he needed to call for help. He felt nervous but determined to finally solve this mystery that had been consuming his life for weeks. Tom sat in his car for 2 hours waiting for the girl to appear. His hands were sweating and his heart was beating fast from anticipation. He had never confronted anyone about anything in his entire life. Tom was naturally a peaceful person who avoided conflict whenever possible, but this situation had pushed him beyond his normal comfort zone. At exactly 11:25, Tom saw the familiar figure walking down the street with her bat. The purple hair was unmistakable even in the darkness. Tom took a deep breath and got out of his car. He turned on his flashlight and started walking toward the girl while trying to look friendly and non-threatening. "Excuse me," he called out in what he hoped was a calm voice. "Could I please talk to you for just a minute? I think there has been some kind of misunderstanding between us." The girl stopped walking and turned toward Tom. In the beam of his flashlight, he could see her face clearly for the first time. She looked even younger than he had thought, maybe 15 instead of 16. Her purple hair was cut short and spiky. She had multiple earrings and was wearing all black clothing, including heavy boots that looked like they could kick through concrete. But instead of stopping to talk, the girl immediately started running. Tom was completely surprised by her reaction. He had expected her to be curious about why he wanted to talk, or maybe even defiant and argumentative. Running away had never occurred to him as a possibility. "Wait," Tom shouted as he began chasing after her. "I just want to understand why you keep destroying my mailbox. I am not angry, I just want to talk." But the girl was much faster than Tom had anticipated. She was young and athletic while Tom was 52 years old and spent most of his time sitting at a desk. The girl ran between houses and jumped over fences like she knew the neighborhood better than Tom did. She moved through the darkness with confidence while Tom stumbled and gasped for breath. Tom's lungs burned and his legs felt heavy after just a few minutes of running. The girl had already disappeared completely while Tom was still trying to figure out which direction she had gone. He stood in the middle of the street, breathing hard and feeling defeated. His confrontation plan had been a complete failure. Tom walked slowly back to his car, feeling embarrassed and frustrated. He had imagined having a reasonable conversation with the girl, but instead he had probably scared her even more. Now she might increase her attacks or start targeting other parts of his property. Tom worried that his attempted confrontation had made the situation worse instead of better. The next morning brought exactly what Tom had feared. His mailbox was not just destroyed this time, it was completely obliterated. The girl had used her bat to smash it into tiny pieces that were scattered across his entire yard. She had also kicked over his garbage cans and trampled his flower garden. The message was clear that Tom's attempt to catch her had only made her more angry and destructive. Sarah found Tom sitting on his front steps, staring at the wreckage. She sat down beside him and put her arm around his shoulders. "Tom, this has gone too far," she said gently. "You tried to handle it yourself, but now you need professional help. We have to call the police before this girl does something even worse." Tom nodded his head slowly. He finally understood that he was dealing with someone who was not going to respond to reason or kindness. The purple-haired girl was committed to making his life miserable, and she was better at this game than he was. Tom realized he needed a completely different approach if he was ever going to win this battle. Tom became a man obsessed with finding a solution to his purple-haired problem. He could not concentrate at work because his mind was constantly thinking about mailbox security and vandal catching techniques. During his lunch breaks, Tom researched home security systems on his computer instead of eating sandwiches and talking with coworkers. He discovered a whole world of information about protecting property from teenage vandals. There were websites dedicated to mailbox security forums, where people shared their experiences with destructive neighbors, and online stores that sold specialized anti-vandalism equipment. Tom felt both relieved and disturbed to learn that many other people were dealing with similar problems. Tom started watching YouTube videos about motion sensors, hidden cameras, and various trap mechanisms. He learned about infrared detectors that could sense movement in complete darkness and alarm systems that would wake up the entire neighborhood when activated. Some of the devices looked very expensive and complicated, but Tom was willing to invest whatever it took to solve his problem. His internet search history became filled with phrases like how to catch teenage vandals legally and mailbox protection systems that actually work. Tom bookmarked dozens of websites and took detailed notes about different security options. He even found legal advice forums where people discussed what homeowners could and could not do to protect their property from destruction. Sarah found Tom's notebook filled with diagrams and technical drawings that looked like engineering blueprints. She was worried about how much time and mental energy her husband was putting into this mailbox situation. Tom barely talked about anything else anymore, and he seemed to be losing sleep over planning his next move. At work, Tom's coworkers started noticing his distraction and preoccupation. During meetings, he would sketch mechanical designs instead of taking notes about insurance policies. His friend Mike from accounting asked if everything was okay at home because Tom seemed stressed and unfocused. But Tom did not want to admit that a teenage girl was controlling his entire life. Tom visited 3 different hardware stores, asking detailed questions about springs, timers, and weight-activated triggers. The store employees looked at him strangely when he described the specific kind of trap mechanism he wanted to build. One clerk asked if Tom was planning to catch animals or people because the equipment he was requesting seemed more suited for hunting than home security. Tom assured everyone that he just wanted to protect his mailbox from vandalism, but he could tell that people thought his plans sounded extreme. Most homeowners would simply install a security camera or call the police. Tom's engineering approach to the problem was unusual and probably seemed excessive to outside observers. But Tom did not care what other people thought about his methods. He was tired of being a victim, and he wanted to take control of the situation. The purple-haired girl had made this personal by targeting him specifically and repeatedly. If she wanted to play games, then Tom was going to show her that he could play better than she could. Tom spent hours reading about the legal aspects of property protection. He learned that homeowners had the right to defend their property from vandalism as long as they did not cause serious injury to the vandals. Tom could legally build traps and security systems on his own property, but he had to be careful not to create devices that could actually hurt someone. This legal limitation was frustrating because Tom wanted to build something that would teach the purple-haired girl a real lesson. But he also did not want to go to jail for accidentally injuring a teenager. Tom had to find a way to catch and embarrass his vandal without causing physical harm that could get him in legal trouble. Tom's garage became his research laboratory, where he experimented with different materials and mechanisms. He built small models of various trap designs to test how they would work in real situations. Some of his ideas were too complicated, while others were not reliable enough to catch a smart and experienced vandal. After 2 weeks of intensive research and planning, Tom finally had a clear vision of what he wanted to build. His device would look like an ordinary mailbox from the outside, but hidden inside would be an intricate system that would surprise and capture anyone who tried to destroy it. Tom called his creation the Mailbox Guardian, and he was excited to begin construction. Tom's garage transformed into a high-tech workshop over the next 2 weeks. He cleared out boxes of old Christmas decorations and unused exercise equipment to make room for his engineering project. The space filled with tools, springs, pulleys, small motors, and electronic components that Tom had ordered online. His workbench looked like a combination of a hardware store and a science laboratory. The Mailbox Guardian was the most complex thing Tom had ever attempted to build. From the outside, it looked exactly like a normal mailbox painted white to match his previous ones. But hidden inside was an intricate system of mechanical and electronic parts that would activate when someone tried to vandalize it. The core mechanism was brilliant in its simplicity. When someone swung a bat or other weapon at the mailbox, a series of springs and pulleys would grab the weapon and pull it inside through a hidden opening. The weapon would then be locked securely inside the mailbox, while a loud alarm sounded and bright lights flashed to attract attention. Tom had also installed 3 small security cameras that would automatically start recording when the trap activated. The cameras were positioned to capture clear images of the vandal's face from multiple angles. This evidence would be perfect for identifying the purple-haired girl and proving her guilt to the police. The most challenging part of the construction was making sure all the mechanical parts worked together smoothly. Tom had to adjust the spring tension so it was strong enough to grab a bat, but not so powerful that it could injure someone's arm. The timing had to be perfect, or the trap would activate too early or too late to catch the weapon. Tom tested his invention dozens of times using an old baseball bat from his closet. He would swing at the mailbox from different angles and distances to make sure the grabbing mechanism worked consistently. Each test required him to reset all the springs and pulleys, which took about 10 minutes of careful adjustment. Sarah watched her husband working in the garage and thought he had completely lost his mind. "Tom, you are spending more time on this mailbox project than you spend on your actual job," she complained. "This teenage girl has turned you into someone I barely recognize. You used to be calm and reasonable, but now you are obsessed with revenge." But Tom felt more focused and energized than he had in years. Building the Mailbox Guardian gave him a sense of purpose and control that had been missing from his life. He was using his intelligence and creativity to solve a real problem instead of just sitting at his desk processing insurance claims all day. The electronic components were easier to install than Tom had expected. The motion sensors would detect when someone approached the mailbox and automatically turn on the recording cameras. The alarm system was connected to speakers that Tom had hidden in the bushes around his mailbox. When the trap activated, the entire neighborhood would hear a loud siren that would wake everyone up. Tom also installed bright LED lights that would flash like police car emergency lights when the alarm sounded. The purple-haired girl would be caught in the middle of a light show that would make her feel like she was being arrested. Tom imagined how embarrassed and scared she would be when his trap turned her quiet vandalism into a public spectacle. The final touch was a remote control system that would allow Tom to watch everything from his bedroom window. He could see the camera feeds on a small monitor and control the alarm and lights manually if needed. Tom felt like a security professional with his high-tech surveillance equipment. After 2 weeks of intensive construction, Tom's Mailbox Guardian was finally complete. He installed it at the end of his driveway late one evening when none of his neighbors were outside watching. The new mailbox looked completely normal and innocent. No one would suspect that it contained enough technology and mechanical complexity to catch an experienced vandal. Tom tested the entire system one final time to make sure everything worked perfectly. The weapon-grabbing mechanism responded instantly when he swung his test bat. The cameras captured clear images of his face. The alarm was loud enough to wake the dead, and the flashing lights were bright enough to be seen from space. Tom felt proud of his engineering masterpiece and confident that his days of being a vandalism victim were finally over. The purple-haired girl had no idea what kind of surprise was waiting for her. Tom could hardly wait to see the look on her face when his trap sprung and caught her red-handed with evidence that would send her to juvenile detention. Tom waited 3 long nights for the purple-haired girl to return. Each evening he positioned himself by his bedroom window with his remote control monitor and a fresh cup of coffee. The anticipation was almost unbearable as he watched his innocent-looking mailbox standing at the end of his driveway like a loaded mousetrap waiting for its victim. On the first 2 nights, nothing happened. Tom began to worry that maybe the girl had moved on to targeting someone else's property, or perhaps she had seen him installing his new mailbox and become suspicious. But Tom knew from his weeks of surveillance that she was persistent and would eventually return to continue her campaign of destruction. Thursday night was foggy and cold with poor visibility that would provide perfect cover for vandalism activities. Tom felt in his bones that this would be the night when all his planning and hard work would finally pay off. He sat by his window with his monitoring equipment ready and his cell phone prepared to call the police the moment his trap activated. At exactly 11:42, Tom saw a familiar figure emerging from the fog. The purple hair was unmistakable even in the poor lighting conditions. The girl carried her usual baseball bat and walked with the same confident stride that Tom had observed during his previous surveillance sessions. She had no idea that she was walking directly into the most sophisticated mailbox trap ever constructed. Tom's heart started beating rapidly with excitement and nervous energy. After weeks of frustration and humiliation, he was finally going to get justice. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his monitoring equipment to get the best possible view of what was about to happen. This moment would make all his sleepless nights and obsessive planning worthwhile. The girl approached Tom's mailbox and stopped to examine it just like she had done before. Tom could see her through his cameras studying the seemingly normal appearance of his mailbox guardian. She had no way of knowing that she was looking at a sophisticated piece of engineering designed specifically to catch vandals like herself. She raised her bat with the same casual confidence she had shown during her previous attacks. Tom held his breath as he watched her prepare to swing. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion as the bat moved through the air toward his innocent-looking mailbox. This was the moment Tom had been dreaming about for weeks. The instant the bat made contact with the mailbox, Tom's trap activated with perfect precision. The hidden springs and pulleys grabbed the bat and yanked it out of the girl's hands with a loud mechanical sound that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. The bat disappeared inside the mailbox with a satisfying clang as the locking mechanism engaged automatically. Simultaneously, the alarm system began wailing with a piercing siren that could probably be heard 3 blocks away. The LED lights started flashing in a rapid sequence of red, white, and blue that turned the entire area into a miniature disco. The 3 security cameras began recording everything in high-definition detail that would provide perfect evidence for the police. The purple-haired girl stood frozen in shock and confusion as Tom's technological masterpiece surrounded her with noise and light. She tugged frantically at her trapped bat, trying to pull it free from the mailbox, but the locking mechanism held firm. The girl looked around desperately as house lights began turning on throughout the neighborhood in response to the commotion. Tom felt a surge of victory and satisfaction, unlike anything he had ever experienced. His trap had worked exactly as designed, and the purple-haired vandal was caught completely off guard. Tom grabbed his cell phone and dialed 911 to report that he had caught a vandal in the act of destroying his property. Within minutes, Tom could hear police sirens approaching from multiple directions. The flashing lights of squad cars began appearing at both ends of Maple Street as officers responded to what sounded like a major emergency. Tom's simple mailbox vandalism problem had suddenly become a neighborhood spectacle that would be talked about for years. The girl continued pulling at her trapped bat even as the police cars surrounded her. She seemed unable to accept that she had been outsmarted by her victim. Tom watched from his window as officers approached the girl with their flashlights and began asking questions about what she was doing. Tom put on his bathrobe and walked outside to meet the police officers. He felt proud and vindicated as he explained his sophisticated trap system to the impressed officers. After weeks of being the helpless victim, Tom was finally in control of the situation. The purple-haired girl who had tormented him was now the one who looked scared and defeated. At the police station, Tom finally learned the truth that would change everything he thought he knew about his purple-haired tormentor. The girl's name was Jessica Martinez, and she was 15 years old. She lived just 3 streets away from Tom on Pine Avenue, with her grandmother who was raising her after her parents died in a car accident 2 years earlier. What shocked Tom most was the reason behind Jessica's attacks on his mailbox. The story she told the police officers made Tom's feelings of victory disappear instantly and replaced them with something much more complicated. Jessica had not been targeting Tom randomly or for fun like he had assumed. Her actions were driven by grief and anger that Tom had never imagined possible. 6 months earlier, Jessica's 8-year-old brother Danny had been killed in a hit-and-run accident while riding his bicycle. The accident happened at the intersection directly across from where Tom's mailbox stood. Danny had been riding home from school when a speeding car ran a red light and struck him before fleeing the scene. The little boy died instantly, and the driver was never caught or identified. Jessica explained through tears that Tom's mailbox had blocked the view of the security camera that might have captured the license plate of the car that killed her brother. She had studied the intersection for weeks trying to understand how the accident happened and why no one had been able to identify the driver. In her 15-year-old mind, Tom's mailbox had become the reason that justice was denied to her family. Tom sat in the police station feeling his world turn upside down as he listened to Jessica's story. The girl he had seen as a random vandal who enjoyed destroying property was actually a grieving sister who blamed his mailbox for preventing her brother's killer from being caught. Her attacks had been acts of desperate revenge against what she saw as an obstacle to justice. The police officers explained that Jessica's reasoning was not entirely logical. The security camera in question belonged to a store that was closed during the accident, and the camera had not been working properly for months before Danny's death. Moving Tom's mailbox would not have changed anything about the investigation or helped identify the hit-and-run driver. But Tom understood that grief and trauma do not always follow logical thinking patterns. Jessica was a child who had lost her little brother and needed someone to blame for the injustice she felt. Tom's mailbox had become a symbol of everything that was wrong with a world where children could be killed by strangers who faced no consequences for their actions. As Tom listened to Jessica's story, he felt his anger dissolving into sympathy and understanding. This girl was not a criminal or a troublemaker. She was a heartbroken sister who was dealing with loss and grief in the only way she knew how. Her attacks on his mailbox had been her way of fighting back against a situation that made no sense to her young mind. Instead of pressing charges against Jessica, Tom made a decision that surprised everyone in the police station. He told the officers that he wanted to drop all charges and work with Jessica's family to find a better solution to their conflict. Tom realized that sending a grieving child to juvenile detention would not solve anything and would only add more pain to an already tragic situation. Over the following weeks, Tom worked with Jessica and her grandmother to create a memorial for Danny at the intersection where he had died. Tom voluntarily moved his mailbox to a different location that would not interfere with any future security cameras. He also helped Jessica's family plant a small garden with flowers and a bench where people could sit and remember the little boy who had died too young. Jessica never apologized directly to Tom for destroying his mailboxes, but she did help him install his new mailbox in its relocated position. Working together on the memorial project gave them both a way to heal from the conflict that had consumed their lives for months. Tom learned that sometimes the people who hurt us are dealing with pain that we cannot see or understand. The memorial bench became a peaceful place where Tom would sometimes sit and think about how complicated life could be. He had built an elaborate trap to catch what he thought was a simple vandal, but instead he had discovered a heartbroken child who needed compassion more than punishment. Tom's mailbox war had ended not with victory or defeat, but with understanding and healing that benefited everyone involved.